Hey, everybody. About 45 days after the end of each calendar quarter, we learn what all the big money managers were buying and selling. They have to file a form called the 13F with the SEC that tells us all their stock portfolio activity. This is how we learn what hedge fund managers have been buying and selling and things like that. Uh, Perhaps the most watched one is Berkshire Hathaway because it's Warren Buffett's stock portfolio. He doesn't own all the stocks in there personally, and he doesn't even make all the decisions. But the vast majority of the portfolio it was handpicked by Warren Buffett himself. So people tend to pay a lot of attention when Berkshire reports its activity. Um, we're going to dive into what Buffett is buying and selling in just a little bit. Before we do, please take a minute and check out the link you see on your screen, fool.com/Frankel. You get the top 10 stocks to buy right now from the Motley Fool. They are the sponsor of this video, and it is the best way to support this work I'm doing on YouTube. Again, fool.com/Frankel, and be sure to stay tuned after this video for a message from the Motley Fool. So I'm going to share my screen real quick. We'll dive right into it. All right, so as I mentioned, Berkshire just filed its latest 13F. It comes 45 days after the end of the quarter. In the fourth quarter buys and sells, that's the only one that's generally reported before Berkshire's earnings report. Berkshire is set to report earnings a couple days, or actually the day after I'm recording this. But the earnings report doesn't contain the stocks that Buffett bought or sold, so you have to go to this 13F filing with the SEC. In the past few quarters, Buffett has been a net seller of stocks, meaning that he's sold more stocks than he bought. And it's no exception in the fourth quarter of 2024. Before we dive into what he bought and sold, we don't know why Berkshire decided to make these moves. Buffett is notoriously quiet usually about the moves he's making in the stock market. On occasion at Berkshire's annual meeting, he'll address a question about why he likes the company or not. But he's generally pretty quiet about it. And it's also worth noting that we don't know if it was Warren Buffett himself who made any of these moves. Berkshire has two portfolio managers, Todd Combs and Ted Weschler, and they are increasingly becoming more responsible for Berkshire's capital. All the big decisions are generally made by Buffett himself, like earlier in 2024 when they decided to sell a big portion of the Apple investment. It was likely Buffett who pulled the trigger on that one. But for especially the smaller buys and sells, we don't know who it was. So I'm going to go through these kind of quick because there was a lot. There are only a few notable buys in the quarter. The first one was Constellation Brands. They are the beverage company best known for Corona, Modelo. Ticker symbol is STZ. And this is a brand new investment. This was the only brand new investment in Berkshire's portfolio this quarter. We don't know exactly what they spent, like exactly what day they bought the shares, but right now the market value of the investment's about $1.25 billion. It's a brand new investment. It represents a little over 3% of Constellation, and it's about 0.5% of Berkshire's portfolio. Number two, adding to an existing position is Domino's Pizza. The ticker symbol is DPZ. Berkshire spent about $460 million to add to the position, almost doubled the size of the position in terms of how many shares and how much of the company they own, so it's pretty significant. Berkshire actually owns about 7% of Domino's now, so pretty big investment, not necessarily by Berkshire standards, but by this percentage of the company they own. And smallest new investment they made was Pool. They added $66 million worth of shares. This is a pretty small company. They're a swimming pool manufacturing business and accessories and things like that. So they bumped that one up a little bit, but you can see it's a minuscule portion of Berkshire's portfolio, just 0.08%. So those are the three buys that we didn't already know about. Berkshire actually bought three more stocks during the fourth quarter, but we already knew about those because of SEC filings. Short version is if Berkshire owns more than 10% of a company, it needs to tell people kind of right away when it buys more. So we already knew it added to Occidental Petroleum, which Berkshire's been building a position in for a while, Sirius XM, which Berkshire owns about 35% of, and VeriSign. So Berkshire added to all three of those, and we already knew about those, so I didn't make separate slides for them. And the sells we're going to get through rather quickly because there were a bunch of them. The biggest one was Bank of America. Berkshire sold a significant portion of its Bank of America investment. At one point earlier in 2024, Berkshire owned about 13% of Bank of America and has since reduced its stake a couple times. It sold about 15% of what it owned going into the fourth quarter. It's still the third largest investment in Berkshire's portfolio, represents about 11% of its value, and Berkshire still owns about 9% of Bank of America, but this was a pretty big sale. DaVita is another one, but this is not too significant. Berkshire's been very clear that it wants to maintain its ownership stake under 45%. And as DaVita does buybacks and things like that, their percentage will naturally rise over time. So they need to sell some shares to make up for it. So it sold 0.6% of its investment in DaVita, still Berkshire's largest investment in terms of the percentage it owns. Number 3, and you'll notice Berkshire sold quite a few bank stocks in the fourth quarter. Capital One was a relatively new investment, and Berkshire decreased its stake by about 18%. It still owns about 2% of Capital One, and this is a relatively small investment, makes up about 0.5% of Berkshire's portfolio, but in terms of dollars, it's still a pretty sizable investment. Number 4 is Citigroup, another financial. This was a big decrease. You can see Berkshire decreased its stake by almost 3/4. Obviously not a big fan of Citigroup at the moment, at least doesn't want to own it. So number 5 is T-Mobile, one of Berkshire's newer investments. Pretty decent decrease, about a 7% decrease. Berkshire only owns less than 0.4% of T-Mobile, so it's not a massive investment. They also unloaded a little bit of Charter Communications stock. They decreased that stake by 29%. Still own 1.4% of Charter. Formula One Group, this is part of the Liberty, all the different kinds of Liberty stock that have spun off and what have you over the years. But Berkshire owns 3.2% of Formula One Group as a result, and decreased that investment by about 12% during the quarter. Louisiana Pacific, ticker symbol LPX. That was another sale. Berkshire decreased its ownership by 5%. It still owns about 8% because it's a relatively small business, but sold a little bit of that. New Holdings, this was one of the ones that was more surprising to me just because Berkshire's owned this one for a while. This is the Brazilian financial technology. Again, it's Nubank is their main subsidiary. Berkshire decreased its stake by more than half. It still owns just a little under 1% of New. Not a giant investment because it's not a giant company, but this one was a little surprising to me. This was likely a Ted or Todd move. 10 and 11, don't read too much into this one. Berkshire sold the only 2 ETFs in its portfolio. It was 2 S&P 500 index funds, the Vanguard S&P 500 and the SPDR S&P 500. These were both very small investments in terms of Berkshire's capital. I think each one was roughly $30 million out of a $300 billion stock portfolio. So just based on these, you can't really say that Buffett must be souring on the stock market. That's not necessarily the case. These were pretty small investments, but it is worth noting that they sold all of them, all their shares in the fourth quarter. And finally, Ulta Beauty, this was already a much reduced position. Berkshire sold all of its remaining shares in Ulta. So let me stop my share real quick. We saw in the end of 2020, or the end of the third quarter of 2024, that Berkshire ended with about $325 billion worth of cash. That's probably gone up significantly. By the time you're watching this, we might already have the updated numbers. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's going to be about 360 that we're going to see on the balance sheet just based on all these stock sales and the operating earnings that I'm pretty sure its business has generated and the interest income that $325 billion cash stockpile generated. I'm guessing it went up to about 360 during the fourth quarter. Don't quote me on that. Like I said, you'll probably have the exact number, which isn't available at the time I'm recording this. But let me know what you think about Buffett's buys and sells. I'll do my best to respond to each of them individually. And thanks for watching. I want to thank The Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. The Motley Fool is a company that provides investing insight and stock recommendations for investors of all skill sets and risk levels. You all know how much I love researching new stocks and trying to find the next best investments. So I'm proud to partner with The Motley Fool to bring you 10 stock picks from their popular product, Stock Advisor. Stock Advisor has beaten the market more than 5 times. Go to fool.com/Frankel to get your 10 stock picks now. The Motley Fool Stock Advisor returns are 914% as of January 7th, 2025, and are measured against the S&P 500 returns of 174% as of January 7th, 2025.